Good morning, everybody. I hope you are having a lovely weekend this weekend. I myself have just woken up. I've received my coffee this morning. No preamble with anything citrus related this time around. It's actually raining out here in California. Shocking news today. Hold the presses, bottle it, save it, package it, keep it for the summer. But over time, Warhammer has been, I wouldn't quite say drip feeding. I'd go more on the lines of like a Chinese water torture style in which they've been revealing a lot of things for 11th edition Warhammer. And for those of you who know me, you know I'm a big fan of playing Warhammer, a big fan of learning a lot about the rules and the various changes and what's new, what's next, etc. And talking a bit about that. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. I wanted a more than just the average, new terrain, because that's something that's more for like news channels or people who are really into the minutia. And maybe when we start doing faction focuses, if we start doing faction focuses, I'll do the thing I did in 10th edition where I would scramble in onto my computer in hopes of beating Auspex tactics. However, I don't think I'll be doing that anytime soon. Before we start, however, I don't know if you can see my shirt. Actually, I probably could just do this. It'll probably be much easier. Hello, hi, it's Big Bricky right now. We do have a technical difficulties shirt, as well as a very humorous new big coaster that has been dropped over at the merch store for Adeptus Ridiculous. Obviously, with the Adepticon previews, a technical difficulty shirt only seemed apt. It is only going to be available for the next week. However, I believe it will go down Thursday morning, so check it out in the description. It should also maybe be like in that little YouTube shelf below, and you can go ahead and get it for yourself. So yeah, go ahead and check it out. You only have a couple of days remaining to snag it. Because this is kind of one of those memes that, it's one of those memes, like, you don't need to keep it going for a long while. But anyway, with that being said, new edition means a lot of new stuff. So they had this whole little thing of like your queries answered type thing, in which they answered almost nothing. But then there's a couple other Warcom articles that have been coming out. And I think that today is one of those types of days where it's a lot about having a bit of an important objective look at the new edition, because unfortunately people, they're not always the brightest. They're not always the brightest. And because of that, they tend to overblow a lot of stuff that gets revealed without any actual further context or knowledge. And so this is basically 11th edition new rules, or how to not be a doomer. And so with that, there's been a couple of things, couple changes, very light in terms of genuine details, and the reason that is a little bit annoying is mainly because often the announcers and reveal streams, they'll say stuff, and what they say doesn't always 100% translate into everything that's going on in the actual game, whether that's a mistake or just a different way they're putting it. So moving from that, I want to talk a little bit about the things they have shown off, mainly about army building, various changes to the actual gameplay systems, and a lot to do with terrain. For example, objective markers, as I cry large tears, the no more circles also available. Stratagems, close combat, and then it says the app and stuff like that. So I'm going to go very, very quickly with this one for the time being. So obviously it's a very Blood Angels and Orcs Armageddon type thing for the new box. I really don't want to talk too much about these because I've harped on it to death on the Adeptus Ridiculous Adepticon reveals, which is basically me saying, wow, that certainly is a intercessor with a new helmet. Also, look at that, it's a new Vanguard veteran with a new helmet. Oh, okay, moving on. So unified experience there. So basically, one of the most common complaints about Warhammer 10th edition gameplay is that they lost a bit of the narrative focus, is that they lost a lot of that kind of war gaming feel. Now, if you ever played any Horus Heresy, it's very much the old 7th edition days with all kinds of crazy facings and wild rules and things like that. A lot more of the war game type thing. But 10th edition and in its stead 8th and 9th edition have been streamlined extensively. Now, the 9th edition was actually pretty good when it came to flavor, but it was also so immensely bloated that it became really hard to deal with. That kind of is the tug of war, right? more flavor, more things that make sense for the rules, more bloat. So the two of them are kind of at odds. But 10th edition, I think, pushed too much towards the less flavor side of things. So one of the things to talk about a lot is that rather than separating matched narrative in open ways, the aim is to make every game feel like it has a compelling narrative while also feeling balanced and exciting. So clearly they're doing their very best to just put it like, hey, this is one game system. It's a unified game system. Basically, it's a matched system. However, they're doing it in a way where they want to make it feel more narrative, which also might mean that they are going to remove a lot of like narrative or open types of play and just stick mainly to the matched version or matched adjacent, which would actually maybe help with dev time, which I would like so long as they can pull off the narrative side of things. Obviously, there's the whole, you'll still be able to use your current codex. Thank God, Drukhari players wiping sweat off their brow, much like Guard players did in 9th, even though it didn't much matter because, well, no, they didn't wipe the sweat off their brow because they lost their codex. They'll say there'll be 70 existing and updated detachments. So I'll be perfectly honest. I actually think that this is going to be a bit of an overblown number. I think a lot of people are assuming it's going to be 50 new and 20 updated. I think it's going to be a reverse. I think it's going to be like 30 new, 40 updated. I think it's going to be a higher amount of update than you expect, and that'll mainly be because of this new like detachment points thing we'll talk about in a moment. But there's also some character stuff. Now this here. Okay, I don't think of course. This is something that was coming in the pipeline, but one of my biggest hopes for the new edition leans on this. So it says characters will always be leading, of course, with exceptions like Cypher, the Combi Lieutenant, etc., the Lion. Well, actually, they could have the Lion lead, but he's kind of like his own guy. So they say they no longer lose their best abilities when their bodyguard unit dies. Their heroes will keep swinging at full power, bitter end, etc. So leaders will always lead. That was one of the main things that goes along with, the whole point of the lead. Leaders always lead. It's the point of a leader, right? Now, one thing that you may notice a lot is that if you were to go to look at some different kinds of characters, good Lord, there's a lot of ads on Warhammer now. Jesus. So one of the things you might notice is that they have a lot of like, while this is leading a unit type stuff, here it is. My first thing was always the Hospitaller. While this model is leading a unit, models in that unit have the 5-up feel no pain ability. So there were always scenarios where the Hospitaller would either have their Sacristan unit or whatever die, and then you would be like, okay, I'll start taking damage on my Hospitaller. Okay, my feel no pains, and then you have to be like, pulls out bomb vest, smiling friends. You basically like, no, you don't get the feel no pain anymore. Your bodyguard unit is dead. Very odd stuff, but now you'll keep your stuff. So the assumption is also like assault intercessors give reroll 1s to wound or full rerolls against objectives. Therefore, the captain will always have that. In addition, there's something that should be noted here. This is something that I have always wanted. I've always wanted this. I really hope this is something they do. I know it takes a little bit extra time, but God, I hope it's the case. The Hospitaller is 60 points. Obviously, a Feel No Pain for Sacristans is substantially better than a Feel No Pain for Retributors. Therefore, this model is pointed to what it would be considered the best of its abilities, which would be the Sacristans. Now, another great example of this would be the Necron Technomancer. The Technomancer is clearly pointed as if it was there to lead Wraiths, because you point it to the best possible option, and Wraiths with Technomancer is still insane. 80 points for a Technomancer is actually an insane price point if you're running it with Immortals. Now, the reason why I think they always had $1 is because they didn't always have to lead stuff, and therefore it was really hard to point based on what it was leading, because you chose what you led at the beginning of the game, not in list building, which might surprise some of you because you always knew what it was going to lead. This is more just like, but like this is more just streamlining that regardless. So when you build your list, you make your leaders lead. So I'm hoping that they will have point values depending on what they lead. I think it could be a really fun idea to have a 60-point Technomancer with Immortals, or a 65-point Technomancer with Warriors. I think it's a really cool idea. I think it'd be really fun as a concept, and it would also allow for more granularity and better use in friendly games, testing out new stuff, and so on. Because right now, Technomancer is so insanely expensive because it can lead wraiths. No one will ever put it here. Anyway, moving on. Very cool. Objective markers. They've changed it so there's no longer circles, now it's terrain. We'll talk more about that later. I'm very sad because of my merch stuff, but at the same time, it probably is for the best, right? Stratagems. Okay, so this is actually rather interesting. So it says single units can no longer have multiple stratagems stacked on them in a phase. Already powerful units will now have to cause havoc on their own without the crutch stratagem making them punch harder than they should or making them more survivable than they have right to be. So in terms of stacking strats, there are a lot of examples of this, but a really good example of this would be sometimes like a Space Marine tank, where it would activate Armor of Contempt and then Smoke. And the two stratagems together gave it -1 to hit, benefit of cover, and -1 AP. And so it made it very, very tanky. Like that Vindicator or that Ballistus Dreadnought became way tankier. Now, personally, I'm of the opinion it's a 70-30 split offensive to defensive. I think that it's only like 30% defensive. Normally, when I see people stacking stratagems, it's so that they can slam like +1 AP and lethal hits on something and just make it just ram. Because, you know, people want to make sure something is dead. However, of course, there are lots of defensive things. I think this is a great choice. I think it's a really, really good choice. And I think it also will help make the stratagems a bit more granular. It'll allow them to be a little bit more specific in their use case. And it also means you don't have to balance things for slamming multiple stratagems on them. If one unit was only really good with 2 strats, now it can only pick 1, and therefore maybe the points can come down a little bit because you're not expecting it to use 2 strats now. Okay, close combat. This one is actually a very interesting change here in a lot of ways. So it says small tweaks to the way melee systems work, including the order of pile and consolidate moves and faster system for assigning wounds. The order, I think that's just fast rolling. The order of activation has been changed to help balance the dominance of fights first units. So also choosing your charge after your roll as well as disembark. So you may please correct me if I'm wrong on this one. Take the next part I say with a grain of salt because I'm remembering from Adepticon. But basically, what I recall is that first things first, they go to the Age of Sigmar system where you roll your dice for your charge and then you pick your targets. This is just a phenomenal change. A phenomenal change. Because, like, I like my 9-inch charges. I think it's fun, and I also love the look on an opponent's face because they would never expect you to just do that, right? Oh, I'm gonna drop 9 inches. Let's just bum a charge, see what happens, and then you get it, and then their game plan is all on the weird foot, right? So very often, let's say for the case of what's going on right here, right in this picture, you know, let's say Angron's out here, and he's got like a 3-inch charge directly to these Dark Angel, intercessors right there. You know, that's a little bit of like, it's fine. But like, let's just say Angron rolls his charge and he bums like a 10. If I was the Angron player, I would say, oh, screw the intercessors. I'm flying across the map to kill that Redemptor Dreadnought and turn it into slag. That is what I would end up doing. And so it creates this really fun thing where like, oh, I really want to charge that unit 5 inches away, but there's a unit 3 inches away here as well. Rolls my dice, gets a 4. Ooh, crap. Okay, I'll go over there instead. It will make it so much less of a feels bad. So much less of a feels bad. It also adds a little bit of dynamicness to it because for the most part, you would want to guarantee your charge the best you can because charge rolls are naturally finicky because it's 2 dice. And so with that, you always want to be very, very cautious about where you charge. Now, you know, just the game just kind of opens up. You'll roll a really, really good charge and say, you know what? I think I will go all the way over there. Because why not? Why not? Why wouldn't I go all the way over there and kill you? the guard player in me really likes sometimes having like 20 Cadians, you know, with Nork Deadog and a Castellan in there and a bunch of Power Fists. And then I might just like go up somewhere and I'm staying on an objective and everything is fine. And then there's like some important enemy over there, 11 inches away. And, you know, I don't plan on charging. But then like I'm just kind of like, you know what? Why not? Hey, I'm just gonna roll a charge over there, see what happens. You know, see what happens. And I roll it and I get like a 12. I'm like, guess who's dying tonight? And so this just kind of lets you do that a bit more, right? In addition, they had this thing about order for pile and consolidate. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is the part I'm the most confused on, so I want to make sure. Basically, you go one by one on your whole army. So everyone charge phase. And normally how it goes is like, okay, I'm going to pick these Khorne Berserkers right here. Okay, Khorne Berserkers, pile in, fight, consolidate. Cool. All right, now it's Angron's turn. Pile in, fight, consolidate. Instead, it appears to be, okay, everybody pile in. Zerkers pile, Angron pile, Demon Prince pile, Lord Skull's pile. Okay, now everybody fights. Zerkers, Angron, etc. Okay, now everybody consolidates, which will A, speed things up. That will definitely make things faster, absolutely. Though B, I will say, it does give a bit of onus to the opposing player. Let me give you an example right here. Let's say I've got a nasty Dark Angels combo. I got 10 Hell Blasters in Azrael. And the 10 Hell Blasters in Azrael are kind of stringed up in a big line. Angron charges one side, Berserkers charge the other side. Let's just say it's like 10 Berserkers or whatever. Maybe actually, let me rephrase. Let's do a Demon Prince. A Demon Prince and Angron. They go on both sides. Let's say I fight with Angron first, or he fights with Angron first. Okay, cool. Angron kills like 7 in this area. Well, if I was smart, I'd pull from the Demon Prince side, kill all of them there, and then leave the remaining ones over here by Angron. Now the Demon Prince, because he's already piled in, can't move again anymore, and therefore cannot fight. He can consolidate after that, but he cannot fight. That's a thing that might occur. I could be wrong. It could be a scenario where you consolidate first and then you fight, or maybe like if there is nothing you can fight, you can then make a consolidate, and then if you are next to anything, then you can fight after that. My assumption is probably not. So it does give you a little bit of pulling power on the opposing side of the team, which is interesting. Also, the order of activation has been changed to help balance the dominance of fight first units. A lot of people seem to say that this meant that charging units will always go first instead of fight first. I don't think that's true. I think what they meant is that, let's say I have a Justiciar and Blade Guard, which is a fight first unit, and I'm fighting the Lion, which is a fight first unit. Right now in 10th edition, if I charge the Justiciar and Blade Guard into the Lion, even though I have fights first and he has fights first, the opponent goes first, so the Lion swings. So if you've got two, but then of course, if it's vice versa, the Lion charges my Blade Guard, I fight first during his turn. So it plays this little game of chicken, where you're like, who fight? You know, like hey, swing first, swing first, Lion, swing first, old man, swing first. Like it's very weird. It's very like, you know. So what I think they said, if I was not mistaken, is that if you have a fights first unit, you go first if you charge with that kind of unit. I still think that, let's say if I had just Blade Guard that don't have fights first and I charge the Lion, he still will fight first. But if I have a fights first and he has a fight first, I get the fight first instead of him. I think that's what they mean. And the only reason I think that's what that means is because it makes the most sense and it is the most understandable way to go about it. I feel like that's how it's supposed to go because that does just naturally make the most sense. Enemy fight first units still have a lot of power because they operate really well against non-fight first units. But if it's fight first versus fight first, the current players gets it first. So I think that's how that goes. I hope that's how that goes. I think that's the best idea. Anyway, then you also have the disembark thing. This just seems like basically it's like, oh, I charge a Rhino, and then you can get all the units out to fight even after we charge the Rhino. Though I do believe it is a combat disembark, which basically means you're battle shocked and also 1s and 2s kill your units. or something like that. But basically lets you do that, which is, I think it's fine. You know, it was always a little bit silly having like 20 boys surround a rhino, kill the rhino, and then all the corn berserkers just like can't get out, so they all just die. Or they all like get out and then they just can't move or whatever. I think it's fine. It speeds that up as well. They also made some changes to the app. They said it has a whole bunch of language support, which is, I didn't realize they didn't have that. Awesome, cool. And then also they said that you have so in-game scoring, awesome. Absolutely awesome. Love that the app can actually run games now, which it couldn't before. You have to use like tabletop battles or whatever, which is fair because, you know, tabletop battles is a great app. But in-app is good. And also the ability to see opponents' data sheets while you play. So that one annoys me a little bit. Not because it's bad. It's great, actually. But because they say that specifically and they don't say have the ability to purchase the other rules. Because if they were going to add that, they would have led with that, wouldn't you think? You remember that old statement that Gabe Newell had? He's like, piracy is not I'm paraphrasing, but it's like piracy is not a price problem, it's a service problem. You know why I use Wahapedia with this terrible, terrible amount of ads in this Russian website made by one extremely dedicated, awesome guy? Is because the app is so un-user-friendly. Games Workshop, I said before, I'll say it again. Make me pay $10 a month. I will do it to gain access to every rule. I will literally buy more models from you if I had that, because I have before gone on Wahapedia, looked at a combo with some kind of faction, been like, that looks really cool, and then got those models before. I can't do that on the app. Scoring is great. Please tell me they're adding this kind of thing to 11th edition. I'm assuming opponents' data sheets is some kind of crap where it's like, oh, input your opponent's list into the game, and the units in the list will let you see what they are. Which, you know what I'm going to do in that case? I'm going to run 11 different games with every single army that contains every single unit so I can see what they do. I'm just going to skirt the guidelines again. So, yeah, I don't know. Very bizarre. I'm hoping there's some free rules in there, or if not free, at least let me buy the goddamn rules. I am offering you money. Come on. Okay. Anyway, those are a lot of the really big things that go along there. There are some other terrain things that I do want to talk about, as well as army building. So we'll start off with this one. Obviously, we mentioned the detachment stuff, but there's a system now called detachment points. So as you can see here, they seem to have removed the 500 points thing and just gone straight to the 1,000 and 2,000, which, I mean, is fine. 500 points was always a little bit odd, but 1,000 is okay. Now, it gives you a certain level of detachment points, as well as enhancement limits and unit limits. Now, one thing that might be interesting is that enhancement limits have gone to 4. Used to be 3, now it's 4. Unit limit is still the same. Rule of 3, still normal. And then unit limit is double for battle line units, which is 6, already the case, right? But we also have a thing called detachment points. Now, they haven't shown off any of the detachments here, which is a little bit unfortunate, but they make some statements here. Like, for example, as a dedicated Raven Guard aficionado, you might take an attachment that's entirely specialized in Phobos-clad units, such as infiltrators. Such an attachment would have enhancements, stratagems that are related to focus the unit you love to use. Combining with a larger, more general detachment that affects a broad area of infantry in a strike force battle means that you end up with an army bespoke to your playstyle. Now, obviously, the idea of detachment points allows you to have another knob to turn for balance. For example, good God. For example, if you were to take, we're already here on Necrons, let's talk about Necrons. Necrons have a sip. They have Awakened Dynasty. Awakened Dynasty is fantastic. Genuinely a fantastic one. It's got amazing stratagems across the board. It works for characters, which is most things, while they're leading a unit. It's very good. Very, very good. Awakened Dynasty will probably be a 3-point detachment. It'll probably cost all of your points, because it's very, very good. Same thing for Gladius in Space Marines, same thing for Coterie of the Conceited in Emperor's Children, et cetera, et cetera. Now, let's take a look at like maybe, I don't know, Annihilation Legion. Annihilation Legion is terrible. Absolutely terrible. And it is specifically for Destroyer, Cult, or Flayed Ones. This is a detachment that I can imagine costing 1 or 2 points, and therefore can be mixed with something else. This one might be a 1-pointer because it is, terrible. And then perhaps Cryptek Conclave, which only, oh my god, which only operates, I need an ad blocker. I need some kind of ad blocker. If you have a recommendation for an ad blocker that works on Firefox and stuff that isn't just the standard ad blocker, please let me know. But like this is very Cryptek heavy. And this one might be a 2-coster because it's very, big in the Crypteks. And Crypteks are just, like good, but not crazy good. So that might be how you mix your stuff. Now there's also other things like, no, this doesn't mean that soup armies from other codexes are back on the menu, which is good. I know people love their soup in certain things. If you want to play soup, go play like 1,000 points, 2v2 type games. Those are tons of fun. But like, we can't be doing soup back again. And we can't be doing that again. It was such a problem. Every single time it was a problem. But yes, so you might be thinking, hold on, what if the swinging new attachment features unit doesn't have any characters? This is really cool. The new edition introduces the upgrade tag on some enhancements, which means it can be applied to up to 3 non-character units while only counting as a single choice, though you will need to pay their points cost individually. So I really, really like the upgrade tag. I also like that it says it can be applied to up to 3 units. And it says this gives you more ways to personalize some of your favorite units and mark them with more elite experienced warriors. I actually really like that because you know what my mind goes to? Back in 9th edition, Sisters had the Battle Sister Squad. They also had the Celestian Squad. The Celestian Squad was basically just a Battle Sister Squad, but 1 extra attack, I think 1 extra leadership, 1 extra weapon skill, because the Sisters are weapon skill 4, they were 3. And then also, I think there's like maybe like some small war gear changes, but not many. And they had some different rules and stuff, of course, like that. I actually, because I started my sister's army in 9th edition, I painted a bunch of, because my sister's army is all white, I painted a bunch of black armored sisters to be like, hey, these are Celestians, as opposed to regular battle sisters. Those went away, and that was really sad, because now I have some mismatched painted sisters there, and it was a little bit upsetting. This makes me want to bring that back because now there is a clear and obvious upgrade system for them. Now, personally, is there an easier way to differentiate the upgrades? Sure, you can magnetize them, change their helmets, change their color scheme, whatever the issue might be, but it does mean that there is a way to adjust how those things look, and that is very cool. I think that's really neat. Characters that join will now be designated as either, oh, this is also a fun one. Characters that join will now be designated as either leader or support, and a unit can have 1 of each attached to it, ***. Leaders can run around on their own if they like, but support units must be attached to a bodyguard. Important distinction. So, for example, Space Marine Apothecaries have that rule where it's like, oh, if you're attached to a unit, you can also attach a captain to it, right? Personally, I like this a lot because maybe support units might come down in points a little bit in order to differentiate the 2 major things there. And, that's like neat. Finally, there's Force Disposition, which is basically something that you will do with your detachments that give you a difference in terms of how you build your army, 5 in total, taking all the source and full prior assets and reconnaissance. But yeah, I actually am a very big fan of these changes. I like that detachments can be adjusted that way because then you can mix and match, but also if something is too good, you can just pop up the cost or bring down the cost. More of that is really good. It also allows them to make some changes because for a while it was always like, hey, this Necron unit is too good in this detachment. So now you can change it that way. I also am a very big fan of the whole upgrade tag. I actually really like the upgrade tag a lot. I think it's just a cool way to differentiate stuff. Plus, I remember some of my friends would paint like a really neat Castrican squad back in 9th edition because it had the Barbican's key. That was basically like a once per game uppy downy for the Castrican squad, but back in 9th edition, it was disgustingly powerful. But yeah, just things like that. I don't know. I really like the upgrade tag. It's one of my favorite things here. Great little narrative flair there. Moving along. How your army affects your mission. This one's a little weird. All right. So basically, each force disposition is what your detachment basically is. So your detachments unlock a force disposition of which you will choose to represent your army for each battle. This establishes a broad mission for your army. There are 5 force dispositions in total. Here they are. Now, I can assume something like Purge the Foe would be, what's like a murderous attachment? Berserker Warband, World Eaters, or maybe Penitent Host in Sisters. That's all about murdering people. And so, certain things will have mixtures between the two of them. I'm pretty sure they talk more about this. Oh, maybe they don't. And so, like, hey, for example, the primary mission for a Purge the Foe force that is taking on a disruption opponent is called Punishment. Starting your turn, select 1 to 3 enemy units that are on the battlefield and within range of objectives and/or that destroyed 1 or more friendly units in the previous turn. If you cannot, select 1 enemy unit that is on the battlefield. Until the start of your next turn, those units are condemned. End of the turn, 1 or more condemned enemy units left the battlefield, aka uppy downy stuff too. End of your command phase, second battle onwards, you control 1 or more objectives, excluding your home. You control more objectives than your opponent. And then end of the battle, you control your opponent's home objective. So so as you can see, it's control 1 or more objectives. So you can get it only a max of 15 victory points per turn for primary is what they set. No more than 15. I think it actually goes to 45 as well. I would need to double check. Do they say it anywhere? Oh, here we go. Yeah. It's worth knowing that each primary mission has a total cap of 45 VP per game. I think it's 50 right now, if I recall. And a cap of 15 VP per battle round, with the same for secondary missions. So they're making it half and half. Primary 45, secondary 45, and of course the 10 for painting your army. Also, this is another huge thing that I would like to mention, the keeping thing, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So this is a really fun idea. This is going to suck at first. I promise you. You're probably going to have a lot of questions about it and a lot of like there will be a very obvious situation where Purge the Foe versus Reconnaissance is so clearly favored for Reconnaissance. It's ridiculous. Yeah, that's definitely going to happen 100%. However, I do really like the idea of this because I think there needs to be more disruption in players' game plans. There needs to be more of a tug of war that isn't there at the moment. Now, Warhammer editions do this very often, where they end the edition with often the same thing. I put thing on objective. You must now deal with my thing on the objective. You come deal with my thing on the objective. I deal with your thing on the objective. Bop, 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 bop. That's the whole thing every time. And it's a little samey after a while. It's a little samey. This is really neat because you pick things specifically. And left the battlefield, of course, means destroyed. But you can use this to your advantage and say, hey, Grey Knight player, Bombfest, you are... sorry. Oh, my. I need a toothpick right now. This is clearly gotta calm myself down. This is clearly something that really makes a big difference here. Also, second battle round onwards, it used to control 1 objectives and more. So just 1 is 4. Condemned obviously would be 5 and then 10. total for these 3 together for 14, but then there's additional. It's a whole thing, right? It's very interesting. Death Trap, Disruption Force taking on a taken hold opponent. When, end of your turn, for each terrain area trapped this turn, 2 points. For each of those terrain areas that has an objective, 3 points. Booby Trap, action, your shooting phase. One enemy unit within range of the objective or within one terrain area, there's booby trapped, and therefore you get your points for booby trapping it. And then any battle run, end of your turn, 1 or more enemy units that started the turn within the terrain area were destroyed if that area is booby trapped. So this is, disruption, cause it, like, go in there, go beep, 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 beep. This turns on mine, turns on claymores, claymore, brings 20 claymores to the hauler and perimeter, click, 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 click. We in Tau Ceti, we clowning this bitch. And then, get a lot of points for it. And therefore, this disruption player is probably going to be very interested in running infiltrators and scouts so that they can go up and booby trap all the stuff that they can. They might take more than normal for that reason. It's very interesting. It's very, very interesting. Also, can I look at this real quick with you all? Look at this action. Look at how it's written and how much better it's written. Starts when, units, these. How many times can you use this? Unlimited. Completes now. What does it do? Effect. Oh my God. If everything in Warhammer was written this way, we would have so fewer weirdos arguing over intended rules and like rules as written crap. This is perfect. I love the way this is written. Such an improvement. So this is super neat. And then each force's mission has 5 distinct missions, of course, because there's 5 things. As far as the pregame system, it's pretty much the same. Make your army, choose your mission, determine your deployment. There is a twist thing. I don't know what that means. A little suspicious. Create the battlefield, which is, put the stuff down, determine attacker, defender, and then select secondary missions. Deployment cards are familiar. Each mission pairing also has 3 recommended terrain layouts, which is very cool. You can always do your own thing, but not tournaments, but your own thing. All secondary objectives return much as the same, allowing players to use fixed or tactical. However, big one here, technical just one big change. Instead of only having 2 at any given time, you'll now draw 2 objective cards every turn and keep hold of the ones you haven't scored yet, which is so good. Drawing Assassinate first turn was such a nightmare. Now you're like, oh, these are dead cards. Totally fine. Place down, keep it for later. One day you might have an insane go turn and complete 5 cards in a go. So much better. So much better. That being said, it is worth noting a cap of 15 VP per battle round with the same for secondary missions. So even if you complete 5, you might end up like overscoring. So you still want to be scoring pretty consistently. You don't want to go insane with your scoring, because if you just like sit on an entire stockpile of cards, then it's probably going to be worse for you. Still insanely good change. Optional mechanic, modify core rules, or introduce unexpected challenges. If it's optional, no one at the tournament's ever going to use it, because they never do. However, in the real world, for you playing with your friends, hey, maybe some cool twists. All right. Next up, terrain. Okay, let's talk terrain. This is going to be very interesting. I got a lot of things with this one. So it also helps with take cover, which is the terrain rules. So I want to say a couple of things that go along with this. First things first, the battle layout is really interesting. It's really, really interesting looking. I actually am a big fan of how it looks. I don't like how little there is in your own deployment zone, but I'm kind of okay with that for the most part, mainly because it's just a little, like, you can make it yourself, add some like weird Tyranid tendrils or whatever the hell you feel like it. However, I will say there's actually a guy who made a whole thing in the new Warhammer. There it is. A shout out to the Mystic Legion, who ended up making the board currently that was shown off in the rules, or at least one of the boards. Shout out to them. Looking at it in person, looks very cool. I'm a huge fan of the way it visually looks. I love the general look for so I like the very obviously and clear sight lines that are going on there. Obviously, this is a very quickly made situation. They cut out a bunch of cardboard and stuff, so it doesn't have the same flair, but it feels way more interesting in terms of dynamic. It has way more like interesting types of terrain. And I gotta say, as far as like, it's not just L-shaped ruins anymore, and I really like that. I must admit, it looks very dynamic, and I'm a big fan of it. So big shout out to the Mystic Legion for making this. It was very, very cool. But anyway, they have a lot of super neat looking variants for the types of terrain you've got here. Now, to go from there, terrain objectives are no longer circles, as mentioned before. And so now terrain area is, in fact, the new place for holding objectives. Now, as you can see here, they show off this is an objective. And if you look at these things, you would assume that the objectives are these skulls. So, home field objective, castle, home field objective, castle, no man's land objectives, skull, 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 right? So that's obviously very handy in how it's supposed to be visualized. They also put little areas of terrain on these little bits and pieces here. Now, what's interesting is that they stick around with the usual kind of OC mechanic. So, as you can see here, these OC have 1 and 6 are within terrain area. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 OC. This Penitent Engine is OC2. It is on it. This Castigator is OC3. It is towing on it, therefore it counts. Now, they also showed off that this unit is battle shocked, and its OC is null, zip. Interesting change there. Originally, battle shock made your OC 0, and the way modifiers worked is that you could then increase it with other modifiers, even if you were battle shocked to still have OC. Now, the OC of a unit that's battle shocked is zip, zilch, none, 0, not at all. You cannot change it at all, which makes battle shock a little bit better. Just a little bit. It's kind of some niche cases, but a little bit. It also shows that by touching and towing into an objective, you are still technically holding it. Now, there are a few other things that are important when it comes to terrain stuff that we'll talk about in a moment. But there's also the hidden rule that they mentioned before, which is basically if you're in a terrain feature and you have not shot, you cannot be shot within 15 inches. Now, I would like to make a very interesting point here to look at some stuff. So the way terrain often works now is that it's a ton of L-shaped ruins, right? Now, very often in major events, the L-shaped ruins cover the entire front of the area. There is a lot less ruin terrain here. Notice how it's like this little ruin here, this little ruin here, this little ruin here. There's a lot less of it. Now, I'm going to make the assumption that if you are, in underneath this thing, that the first floor will still have line of sight blocking windows. That would not surprise me as a choice. However, the obscuring rule is still in play. So that's where you see this little eyeball thing, I imagine, where if you see, like if I'm standing, well, you could show it on the thing right here, right? This person is these Tau Fire Warriors. Hey, these sisters have not shot and they're outside of 15. Therefore, even though they can see them, they can't shoot them because of hidden rule. These units are on the other side of the feature, and they're on the other side of the feature, so they are obscure. This is normal. This is how it's always been. This is how it will continue to be. These are in the feature, yet are currently visible, and therefore can be shot. Now, you may notice that there is not many ruins anymore, which means the ability to be shot will actually be a lot higher than it used to be. If I'm standing here in the center, I can get shot from everywhere and almost everything. And that's spooky, right? I mean, like this center objective is very open, as you can see. you can put some stuff over. Like if I'm red team, I could like put some stuff right here, or maybe I can toe in behind this ruin and touch it right behind this ruin. But like it's not much. You know, you can get shot pretty easily once you're on that thing. The downside, of course, though, is that well, it being shot, of course, is that obviously an objective. However, the actual effects of cover are much different now too. So cover is no longer +1 to your save. It is now -1 to the enemy ballistics skill. And also, if you are now having plunging fire, which means you are standing on an above terrain, you get additional to your ballistic skill. Knights, aka things that are towering, which would also include, I think, like Corn Lord of Skulls and Stompas and stuff, will also get +1 to their ballistic skill if you're within 12 inches of the enemy. So there's a reason to be up on terrain now. Also, it's 3 inches, so it's not like the 6-inch thing. You can just go up 1 level, which is pretty good. There's a lot to take in there. Now, people are going to start saying, well, now torrent weapons are no longer as good because they don't ignore cover anymore. And that's factually incorrect. They still do ignore cover. The torrent rule is ignoring cover. You know, the fact that they ignore hit rolls or in a sense don't have a hit roll is ignoring cover now. So that's already technically still there. They still ignores cover. It's just the rule ignores cover is no longer the case. There is a lot to unpack with this, like a lot. The fact that there's way less terrain means that you'll most likely be shot. Or sorry, there's way less like ruins means you're going to be shot more often when you're on a terrain feature. However, you can still toe in various areas, most likely. But the moment you toe in, you will be seen to an extent, right? And of course, the enemy can toe in. Vehicles being able to toe in means that that's also a way for them to be able to get shots and things like that and shoot, but also shoot back. However, the fact that cover reduces the ballistic skill means that, I mean, ballistic skill is a big deal. It's not -1 to hit, it's -1 ballistic skill. So if they have any other additional minuses to hit, you can be -2 to hit, which is pretty scary. However, of course, you can mitigate that by either A, plunging fire, or B, getting in the same terrain as they do to deal with that kind of cover. Now, because one of the biggest issues, of course, will be, oh God, is the game going to get way more killy now because people can be seen easier? Well, with the minus the ballistic skill, most likely not. However, of course, melee armies don't care about that at all, which is really good for melee armies. But there's still questions for that one, right? So you can also look at some of these items here and various objectives where it's like, hey, these things are obscuring back and forth, but if you go over them or in them, you can shoot out of it. And then you can also see that the major kind of like your deployment zone is pretty covered right now too, you know, like there's a lot of terrain covering where you're in the front. So getting alpha strike is not going to be happening as much. There's also a couple other things. There's the hidden, there's obscuring. Also, there's the two types of thing. Terrain features are like ruin stuff, and terrain area is the footprint beneath the terrain. There is a small bit of confusion there that I am a little bit uncertain. For example, it says, you'll notice on the map the number of long, thin areas. Since they're so obscuring, they create new opportunities for different types of terrain, as units can remain out of sight. In our diagram, these represent by mechanic as barricades and field generators, but you can fill these areas with trees, ruins, strange xenos things, etc., make it look interesting. Also, it's not about 2D footprint of the terrain. Height also plays a feature. That would be the plunging fire rule, of course. And then there's the terrain sets right here and there. There was something noted about how some of these terrain areas allow vehicles to move through them. I thought it was over here. I don't really remember exactly where they stated that, but it's like, oh yeah, larger units such as vehicles and monsters will also be able to contribute by claiming objectives and greater safety. While not able to use terrain areas to gain cover, they can still perch behind ruins, trees, and rubble to gain the benefit of cover, which will be most of the time while holding an objective, as objectives are ruins, trees, or rubble. So there's a feeling there where, hey, if you're within the terrain area as infantry based in swarms, you just get cover, right? You just get it. Whereas vehicles and stuff need to still be letting a piece of ruin block them in order for it to actually give them cover, which means you could probably swing around and, cause some issues there. Maybe. So my fear, my small fear here is that it's two parts. One, vehicles are already quite good right now, and if a vehicle like a big one, especially like a Defiler, can tow in the back of this cover, gain -1 ballistic skill, and also be able to hold its objective, that's a lot of power. It's a lot of power. On the other side, of things, there is also the fear that how does the benefit of cover work only if every infantry model is in the feature? The reason for that is because it's the hit roll, not a wound roll. See these 5 sisters? Let's say only one of them was in cover. If you were to take cover as we are currently taking it, you would roll the hit, roll the wound, and then add +1 to your save for one sister, and then roll until she dies, and then take it on the rest with the no cover save. The hit roll affects this from the beginning, right? And so if only one sister is in cover, and then your whole enemy unit gets -1 ballistic skill, that doesn't make sense to me. That's a problem. So my assumption is that they all will have to be in cover to get the benefit of cover. Which if it's infantry, that might make sense. But I need to see how that works. I'm assuming it's all in the area. Also, certain AP effects will be a lot better. AP 1 will be a lot better because of the cover thing. AP 2, etc. will be a lot better. Melee, of course, will still not be affected by AP in any way, shape, or form. So there's also that. And then my only fear is the vehicle thing. Because having to put an entire unit of sisters or whatever in this thing will take a little bit more effort because they're multiple models. Shoving one castigator on the side right here, and then they get cover because you're firing from that side is a lot harder, However, because there are way fewer ruins, there will be way more things shooting and way more shots. So I'm a little torn. On one hand, it's going to be a lot less going on because there's so much more minuses to ballistic skill, which means that I think you'll probably be a little bit tankier. However, to an extent, there's also the whole thing of like, how is this going to affect these kinds of things? It's a little worrying, but we'll have to see how it goes because there's a lot of factions there that like hit on 4s or the orcs and stuff, and you're like a little curious how it's really going to run. And then, of course, that might push you a little bit more towards a combined arms to take your gun, like not be only shooting because of those reasons. However, like a full shooting army, again, like that takes a lot of cover, I have questions. The only thing I'd be curious about is, are they doing terrain in... They may say it here. I don't know. But my big question is like, I don't know. Let's say there's a castigator. Let's say it's right here, right? Let's say these are sisters, right? If they're in the terrain feature and they fire at something else that's in the terrain feature, even let's say it's even if it's being like somewhat obscured by a ruin, does the thing still get the minus? Because at that point I'd be wondering like, hey, could I just like fly some jet bikes from here to here and then shoot the thing that's taking cover because I'm in their cover and therefore remove their cover? I don't know. A lot of questions on that. But regardless, the terrain looks way better. It looks more dynamic. It looks more interesting. You can put all kinds of interesting stuff in there to try to hide and obscure yourself and things like that. And yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of questions. I think there are a lot of people who get very doomery about this kind of stuff. They get very uncertain. They get frightened because, like, oh my God, when the hidden rule was revealed, everyone was like, oh, rip Tau. Like, motherfucker, you don't know. You don't know. Rip Tau, please. You don't know. There's so many things that need to be adjusted. There's so many things that can happen. We have no idea what might occur with these kinds of situations. So let's not rip Tau yet, right? Also, lot of melee changes here. Lot of melee buffs, it would look like here. A lot of people being like, oh, World Eater sweep. You don't know. You don't know. There are a lot of questions that can go on here. Also, excuse me, a lot of long-range shooting options that could be available, right? If you're standing on this side of the like, isn't it exciting that you actually might put your heavy weapon squads on top of a building for once again? Like, if you're standing on this center objective right here, and I put, I don't know, like some Space Marine suppressors, haven't heard that in a while, have you? On the top of this green ruin, and I fire, I can see most of this. If you're behind here, no, but I can see most of this. If you toe in, I can see you. Over here too, I can see things that like in this direction, you know, like across the way. Like that's kind of cool to actually have a backfield gun platform that might actually operate like a turret or like a bunch of dudes up there going, bah, 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 bah. That's super sweet. So I don't know. There's so many questions and so many ways this might change that's very hard to 100% know what the plan is. And that's cool. That makes it different. That makes it interesting. And I'm very excited about that. Anyway, that's most of the 11th edition stuff that we've been seeing so far. There are definitely things I've missed, but there's just a lot going on with it, right? So very interesting, very curious, lots of questions. No army is dead because no army has been fully seen yet, and no army has been played yet, and no points are revealed. Normally, when a new edition happens, every single army's points goes up because to lower the amount of models everybody gets, so don't be surprised by that. However, a lot going on here. Also, way larger objective footprints. Therefore, OC, curious on that one a lot more. Might have a lot more implications. Anyway, I've been yapping to you all for about an hour. My voice hurts a little bit, even just because of the constant talking. Don't be a doomer. 11th edition is, I'll be honest, is looking really good. All of the changes they've shown off are really cool. More detachment stuff, awesome. Way better looking maps, different ways to do objectives, new mission styles, way better charge phase things, stratagem stacking removal. It's looking like almost exclusively positive changes. Some we'll have to see when they arrive, but almost exclusively positive changes, and that is a really awesome thing to see. I'm very excited. I hope you are too. And thank you so much for watching this little ramble and rant and discussion. I hope that you have a great rest of your Sunday, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a good one.